Okay.
All right, everyone, welcome to our Tuesday evening activity. We have our special guest, Leonie Bradbury. I'd like to introduce Leonie, who teaches at the Department of Visual and Media Arts, in addition to curating and directing the Media Art Gallery, administering the Hewitt and Specter Gallery, and serving on the School of the Arts Public Art Think Tank at Emerson College. Prior to Emerson, she served as the Director of Art and Creative Initiatives at Hub Week in Boston for 2 years. And prior to Hub Week, she was a Montserrat staff member for 15 years, working in our gallery, director and curator of our gallery program. So I welcome Dr. Leonie Bradbury, who is also a part of several boards, including the Rocky Neck Art Colony up in Gloucester. And we are excited to have a leading curator of contemporary art with us tonight. And Leonie, you can fill in all the blanks that I might have missed, but lots of acclimates, and we're excited to have you here. Great.
Thanks, Jeffrey, for that lovely introduction, and welcome everybody. I'm so delighted to be talking to you this evening. I'm going to give a talk for about 45 minutes, but then the remainder of the time I would love to have a discussion with you. And the title of the talk is From Object to Event. And as we kind of travel through my talk, you'll understand what I mean with that. And it's really a trajectory that I have experienced as a curator and as a scholar and as a researcher, where over the years, I've become much more interested in the experience of art versus the object of art. Although I very much started as an art historian and as an artist in my training as a lover of the object. And I still love the object too. But I think in terms of my practice, I'm going to share with you why I'm now much more interested in this idea of the event as art, or the experience of art. So I'm going to do a screen share, and we'll kind of go through a couple of different chapters. And then towards the end, yeah, like I said, there'll be plenty of opportunity for discussion and for questions. So here we go. We will start with some screen sharing. And Jeffrey, at any point you can interrupt me and let me know if something is not going well, because from the presenter point of view, it all looks great. So if anything doesn't seem right, you let me know. So thank you. So like I said, the topic of today is curating contemporary art from object to event. So for me, my curatorial practice is really my creative practice, and it's also my intellectual practice. And what I mean with that is that I make exhibitions, and I make exhibitions for a living. But for me, they're very much my creative output and my creative practice. And then also my research as a scholar and as a writer and art historian is very much exhibition based. So the making of exhibitions is really my scholarly practice, as well as creating all of the the related, exhibit-related materials, whether that be public programming or essays, or catalogs,
Are you cool with him going? So you're cool with him going? All right.
All right, we may need to mute someone. So here we go. So I wanted to start with this quote. A curator is best known as the selector and interpreter of works of art for an exhibition, producer, a commissioner, exhibition planner, educator, manager, and organizer. So already in this very short definition provided by Adrian George, a British curator, in the Curator's Handbook, the idea of a curator is already quite expansive. So rather than just an interpreter of works of art or the maker of an exhibition, the curator is also a producer, a commissioner, exhibit planner, etc. So in my particular story, I was trained as an undergrad as an artist. I trained as a painter, but also as an art historian. Then for my master's, I studied at BU, and I was specializing in 20th century art theory and architectural history. And then most recently, I got my PhD in artist philosophy, which was really a hybrid PhD program where we looked at art theory and philosophy and the intersections therein. So, but when I define myself, I call myself a curator of contemporary art. So in terms of my practice, that looks like I make exhibitions, I design public programs, I organize them, I organize conferences. I have a particular passion for organizing conferences. I really love commissioning new works. I love producing exhibition catalogs, being a creative director. I have a research practice. I mentor not just students, but also young professionals in the field. I'm always interested in new experiments, new ventures. So, and those kind of goes on and on, but being a curator is quite a diverse and expansive practice these days. And that's partially why I love being a curator, because it's never boring, and there's very many different facets and different talents that I can draw upon. So, but when I kind of put it succinctly, I think, write, and talk about contemporary art. And I love producing platforms and opportunities for artists to make and present their work, but in order to share their ideas. So to me now, as a curator, it's more about sharing the artist's thoughts and ideas rather than the object. And then if we showcase the object, it is with the intent to share the idea. So at the bottom of this presentation here, you can kind of see that trajectory of objects turn into exhibitions, turn into working with living artists, which really turned into building platforms for ideas. And then over time, I primarily became interested in creating art experiences. And as we go through our talk today, you will learn more about what I mean when I say that. So as Jeffrey mentioned, I was the curator and director at Montserrat College of Art for many years. And I loved being there, and it was a very exciting place to be a curator. I think one thing that people don't often consider when you think of curators is that we really curate for the community that we're a part of. We curate in a context. So it's not just about what we want and what we like and what our interests are. We really are curating for an audience. So while I was at Montserrat, my audience was an art school, a BFA school. So in terms of my curatorial approach, these are a couple of points that I think when I look back at the exhibitions that I made, it usually included all of these, if not 4 out of 5 of these points. So an important thing to me as a curator is taking risks. So, and what I mean with that, we'll explore a little bit later with specific examples, but to me, in part, that means having provocative topics and provocative content. I also think it's important to have a socially relevant topic, not just because that's of interest to myself, but also because it's, as a curator in an academic environment, I think it's very important to think of the things that we're teaching with the exhibitions. And in terms of a general public, if you're curating an exhibition about a topic that's really current right now, you're going to have a lot more visibility and a lot more reach. So often my exhibitions also have a critical point of view, because I'm not just curating for the general public or for my academic audience, I'm also curating for my peers and for the art world. So in that respect, it's important to have a critical point of view. Then fourth, I love commissioning new work or site-specific work. I have a lot of faith in artistic production and the ability for artists to make something out of nothing, or make something in response to a particular circumstance. And to me, it always seemed obvious to kind of have that faith in artists and working with artists, but over the years, I've come to realize that actually not all curators have that kind of faith, or not all institutions are so comfortable with taking that kind of risk, where you're giving an artist a certain amount of money and you're giving them a certain amount of leeway to make a new work when you don't actually really know, or you're not guaranteed that the outcome is actually what you hope it is. So, but I have a tremendous amount of faith in the artists that I work with, and also, yeah, a lot of trust in terms of the outcome of our collaboration. So, and then lastly, the last point there, this idea that art is thought and that art is knowledge producing is a very important current in terms of all of the work that I do, where there's not just art and people writing about art or thinking about art, but art itself is actually knowledge producing. So the artwork itself, separate from the artist or the context in which it is exhibited, actually is knowledge and knowledge producing. So I'm going to give a couple of examples of some older exhibitions that I did while I was at Montserrat. So this is an exhibit called It's Alive, a Laboratory of Biotech Art. The goal of this exhibit, this was curated in 2007 when Dolly the sheep and all of that research relating to the genomic properties were coming out at that time. And biotechnology was rapidly developing as a new field in science. And there were a lot of issues and speculations, and it was very much a current topic. And there was a lot of kind of confusion and just the lack of general understanding of what that field meant. So I was interested in looking at artists' work who were exploring biotechnology and who were responding to that field in order to better understand it myself, but also to create an exhibit experience for my students. So here's a project by Jennifer Willett and Sean Bailey. They have a company called Biotechnica, and they are sculptors and artists who worked with biomatter. So they were really interested in living tissue sculptures. So this was something that was quite radical at the time and probably is quite radical today. And they were Canadian, and as we were trying to import their sculptures to bring them to the gallery, we actually were not able to get them through customs because of the specific nature of that work and how challenging it was because they were living tissue sculptures. We also had some other works. We had a couple of pieces by Bryant Burkhart called Embryo that you see on the left. These weren't real embryos, but they looked like embryos. One of the challenging things of that exhibit was that it was actually quite hard to find living works of art, and there were quite a few challenging limitations around showcasing that work. So we kind of compromised in some of the areas. And then in the middle, we had some bioluminescent drawings, bio drawings by Hunter O'Reilly, and those were actually living organisms, very microscopic, who were in these little petri dishes that you can see kind of here. And we would feed them this kind of organic matter, and as the beings ate, they would glow. So we had a little booth, and you could like stick your head in and put a little curtain over your head, and then you could see these bioluminescent drawings being created as the bacteria ate the food that we gave them. We also had a project by another Canadian artist, Adam Brandeis, called Gen Pets. And these were not real pets, don't worry, no animals were harmed in this exhibition. So, but these were artificial genetic pets where the artist imagined that, you know, if we were going to buy pets in the future, we would be able to buy a generic pet and then adjust the different genetic codes and then choose like the type of fur or the type of teeth or claws or, you know, kind of the nature of the animal. And so when you would go to a pet store, you would see these genetic pets on the wall. And what was very kind of evocative in terms of this work was that these were animatronic. So the little animals were breathing, and you could see a little bit of, they're not real, but see a little bit of breath on the windscreen of their packaging, and as well as see a heartbeat. So this is a very evocative installation. Another exhibit, just to give another example of how to use a social topic in an exhibit, was Cornucopia, Documenting the Land of Plenty, which was a photography show that I did for Montserrat. There was the work by Chris Jordan, who documents these kind of waste piles, kind of the end of the life cycle of our consumer culture. We also had Brian Ulrich, who documents malls as well as thrift stores. So here's kind of an installation view of the final installation. And if you kind of just ignore this big pile in the middle, you could see how this was shaping up to be this gorgeous, very beautiful, aestheticized exhibition about consumer culture. And to me, at some point in the process of curating this show, I felt it was too beautiful. Like it was just too pretty. And it dealt with such a serious subject matter that I wanted to kind of counter the beauty of the images of something that we were critiquing. So I came across the work of Portia Munson, and she has a piece called Lawn, which is what you see here. in the middle of the image. And it's a giant collection of lawn care and lawn related items, all in green, that are plastic and that were discarded. And the artist collected these on the side of the road, from thrift shops, from yard sales. So for 3 or 4 years, she collected these objects, and then she installs it as a piece called Lawn to make a commentary on the American obsession with the lawn and the amount of kind of polluting and non-environmentally friendly objects that we use in order to maintain this idea of the lawn. So the thing that, so ever since this exhibit, I called this the wrench. So this is kind of a curatorial trope that, to me, when my exhibit becomes too beautiful or too easy or too kind of uniform, I try to think of this sculpture and think of this wrench and like, how can I put a wrench in it? Or what can I do to kind of create some tension within the exhibit in a creative way? And then I don't know if Jeffrey remembers this, but this was a very smelly exhibition because these objects are very musty. And we actually had to install a special ventilation system and all sorts of air fresheners. And, you know, it ended up being quite literally a visceral experience.
I was going to say that, Leonie. I didn't want to interrupt, but yes, I remember the Lysol spray every day would happen at the end of the day to kill the bacteria a little bit for the next day of viewing.
Yes, it was quite intense. So, you know, but, you know, it really hit home the theme of the exhibition, though, because otherwise it would have just been like, oh, it's just so beautiful. But then when you were kind of faced with the reality of consumer culture and this overconsumption, that, yeah, it just really brought it home in a whole new way. So then another project that I worked on was the Guerrilla Girls exhibition. The exhibit itself was curated by a colleague of mine at Columbia College in Chicago, and she and I were both simultaneously working on a Guerrilla Girls exhibition, and we met each other at a conference and asked what we were working on, and she's like, oh, I'm working on a Guerrilla Girls show, and I was like, oh, me too. So we decided to kind of join forces, and she was farther ahead than me in terms of the planning. So we decided that her exhibit would travel to my venue, and then I would commission a new work specific to Boston in conjunction with the exhibit. So here's the billboard that we commissioned from the Guerrilla Girls. We actually went to the MFA in Boston with 2 of the Guerrilla Girls and a group of students, and we counted all of the male and female nudes at the MFA to provide the data for this banner. One interesting thing is that I discovered a mobile billboard company in the time that I was commissioning this billboard and trying to figure out where to put it. So we thought it would be really cool to have it be a mobile billboard. And this billboard drove around to various college campuses in the greater Boston area, including upon the initiative of the driver of the truck one day to the MFA. So he parked the image in front of the MFA or the truck with the billboard and took a photo of it, posted it on social media, and it went viral. And within 24 hours, the president of Montserrat, the director of the MFA, there basically was a very intense conversation happening about this, and we landed on the front page of the Boston Globe. And although it was a tense moment, it really brought to light the conversation that we still needed to have about showcasing art by women in museums today. And then, you know, we could even extend that to artists of color and artists of different, well, anyway, so we'll just move on. But basically, it provoked this opportunity for dialogue in a way that at the time was kind of scary and on the edge. But in hindsight, it was actually quite remarkable that the commissioning of the billboard and the hosting of the exhibition, in the sense that we took a risk, really paid off. So here are the Guerrilla Girls in my office, holding some work by another artist, Cashmere Warhol. So here's one of the last exhibitions I curated for Montserrat, Observance, As I See You, You See Me. And this was a group of photographic portraits. This is what it looked like in the gallery. So you can see there's quite some difference in scale. There's some really small Polaroids here, some large oversized portraits, and then some kind of mid-sized photographs. We were able to include the work by Maria Magdalena Campos Pon. Also an important series by Caleb Cole. And that was probably, just to stop for one moment there, this is probably the last exhibition where I curated like objects in a white room. And yeah, we'll kind of transition from this idea of the object in the white cube to art as an experience right about now. So the last project that I organized for Montserrat, which actually ended up happening after I had left there, we received a large NEA grant. And the idea of this project, The Beast, was to create a kind of a social practice experiment in the gallery where we were building a sculpture called The Beast. And then inside the sculpture, the belly of the beast would be used as a performance space, as a community activated space. And all the content in the belly of the beast would not be generated by the artist, but would be generated by the community. So here you can see the beast in the gallery. It's intentionally sized very large, like oversized, so it almost doesn't quite fit inside the gallery. It was made out of local materials of different boats and ships that were donated to the gallery. Here's what it looks like on the inside. So just to go back quickly. So if you went into the gallery here, there's one door here, you would see just large oversized sculpture, and then you could kind of crawl through here, or there's also another door that you can kind of see behind here. And if you entered in the second door, you would enter in the belly of the beast. So this would be the belly of the beast, which was kind of set up like a living room. There was a swing chair. There was lots of little kind of stumps or stools. There was some two-dimensional work that was created by the artist John Poyce. And then right here was a conversation area, and we would program music and performance and talks. And the exhibition really became, or the sculpture was kind of a site for performance and community engagement. And here's another view, seeing it in action with people. It was quite a versatile space, and it was exciting because it was community generated content, and people could just sign up on a Google Calendar and post whatever event they wanted to host in there, and then it would just happen. So after I left Montserrat in 2016, or in kind of a little bit leading up to that, I was really interested in, again, that idea of creating an art experience versus just an exhibition with objects in a cube. So I started a company called Alter Project with my colleague at the time, Maggie Cavallo, and we were really interested in bridging the gap between artists, community, and also corporations, and how could we connect people with money, artists with talent, and then our audiences in creative ways, and create opportunities to encounter art in places where you did not expect it. So we had one partnership with Artcetera, which was an organization that raised money to fight AIDS. And they have a big annual auction every year. And we curated live art experiences for the auction that year. But in a lead up to that auction, we organized a performance event with a Boston-based artist, Autumn On. And here she is in a pool at the Ritz-Carlton in Miami during Art Basel, the big international art fair. And we had rented out the pool and the patio next to the pool, and as part of a big kind of lead up fundraiser for the Artcetera auction, we commissioned this new work, Suspended, by Autumn On, where she performed live in a swimming pool. And it was an incredible piece that really spoke to the many lives lost to AIDS and the grief and the kind of limbo that associates that process of grief. And it was a very dramatic performance in a beautiful setting, but very unexpected. After that, Maggie and I were hired by Illuminous, which is a light festival in Boston, to curate the 2015 lineup. So we put together a team of curators. We produced about 36 different projects, which were taking place that year on Lansdowne Street in downtown Boston, right next to Fenway Park, including some projects happening at Fenway Park. And you can see a couple of images here. One of the most exciting things was, so this is right on Lansdowne Street. This is normally a very busy street. We were able to shut it down and took over all of the spaces adjacent to this one block in Boston. This is a piece by Brian Knepp, Healing Pool, which I produced and was responsible for. And this is a piece that's being projected from the side of Fenway Park onto the floor, and it's responsive to people's movements. So as people interact with the piece responds and changes. So one of the most exciting things is that we had about 25,000 people come through this exhibit who were just walking by, going to other things, going to bars, and some coming specifically for this event. But a lot of people were kind of having an unexpected encounter with a contemporary art experience, which was really exciting. And it was a very magical event. And there were many people of different ages, as you can just tell from this picture. There were children. Yeah, so I think that was one of the most exciting kind of art experiences that I'd ever had as a curator. And it really just, I don't know, lit a fire in me in the sense that I was really interested in creating more of those opportunities, because it was so different than kind of being in the quote unquote ivory tower. It was like to be out on the street in the public with no barriers. Anyone could walk in, it was free. You could just go through the work of art. So in part as a result of the experience that I had there and the connections made on that project, I ended up being hired by kind of a startup called Hub Week, which was a collaboration by Harvard, the Boston Globe, MIT, and MGH Hospital in Boston. And they had a festival for a couple of years, but they were really looking to make a festival site, which they hadn't done yet before. So Curating the Public Square is the title of this section. Hub Week. So Hub Week was really an innovation festival, an art, science, and technology festival. And I was really hired to design something epic, to visualize and vision a centralized festival site and what that could look like in downtown Boston. So I'm sure that, I don't know where all of you are from, but this is right downtown Boston. It's a city hall, the brutalist architecture, and it has this huge plaza in front of it. And this was the site that was assigned to us by our board and our leadership. And they were like, we really want you to do the event here. So this is a very challenging site. As you can tell, just right this photo, there's a big puddle right there. We experienced that puddle live during our festival. Here's a view of it from above. So we basically activated almost this entire site. And I'll show you the next picture. So this is what it looked like in 2017. You see we had about 6 geodesic domes. We had about 80 shipping containers that we activated with art, with science, with technology, with startup companies, kind of like a giant expo fair or a mini world fair. That was kind of the vibe we're going after. We were also projecting on City Hall, so we commissioned work by a number of artists to be projected directly onto the building. So in the center of the festival site was a little lounge called the Triangle Lounge, where we had a large piece here in the background. We also commissioned a new work by Catherine Mitchell-Dorico. And then on the left here, we had an interactive piece that was inspired by the other 2 pieces where people could use pieces of tape and kind of make their own artwork on the container wall. And it was a big success every night. A couple of other vignettes of some of the artworks that were created. Here's the project in 2018. So a little bit different setup, but a very similar vibe. And the theme this year was We the People. So it was very much focused on this idea of the public and democracy and how artists play a role in that. And I have a short video here, which normally has a little bit of sound, but I'll just talk over it. So this is just the trailer for one of the years of the festival. So you can see our 2018 theme. And what was exciting to me about curating art in this very public context is that it really was positioning the artist as part of the thought leadership in the sciences, in the intellectual community in Boston, as something that was very much equal to and on par with. And that was very much my my mission within the organization, was to always advocate for the arts. As a curator, it was extremely exciting to not just be working with visual arts, but also be working with music, with dance, with theater, with very experimental, cutting edge projects that included technology. And again, to have a huge public audience, which while I was working at Montserrat, to put it in perspective, we might have 4,000 people or so who would come and see our exhibits throughout the year. And for Hub Week, we had 50,000 people who would see the works of art in a period of 5 days. So to have that large of an audience was incredibly invigorating and very exciting. So although it was an incredibly exciting opportunity to be a part of this startup and to be able to be the artistic director for such a large public event, I chose to, actually about a year ago, to jump on an opportunity at Emerson College. And Emerson College is a school in downtown Boston, and they have a big school of the arts and a school of communications. So the position would be to be a curator and also be a professor, full-time faculty there, and to be in charge of a platform of bringing visual arts to campus. So when I received the position about a year ago, I was interested in creating a new platform called Emerson Contemporary, which really is the name for the platform of the various visual art activities that we do on campus. And we don't teach traditional BFA studio arts at Emerson. We teach visual media arts. There's a lot of filmmakers, documentary film. There's television production, radio production. Yeah, so it's acting and theater. So it's an art school, but not really having a studio arts practice at the core of it. So it's a interesting kind of new context to be showcasing work in. So this is our main gallery space, the Media Art Gallery. It's right downtown, right off the Common. It has these big storefront windows. We have a second gallery space, which is an internal space inside an academic building, which we showcase all of our student works and BFA shows and faculty projects. I'm also in charge of the Art on Campus initiative. So really thinking of how we can bring visual arts to different parts of our campus. And I also, as part of my job, have a mandate to organize 1 to 2 public art events each year, which take place in the city. So I have a short video here of a recent projection project that we did called One Emerson. When Emerson's commencement was postponed this year due to COVID, we wanted to do something spectacular or something big to acknowledge our graduates, and we decided to do a projection on one of our buildings right on the Common. So I'm only going to show you the art part of the presentation, but it was about a 30-minute show, if you will. Here you can see the projectors that we used. We used 10 very high resolution projectors to project on this building called the Little Building. And I commissioned work by a glitch artist, Allison, who created these specific kind of short digital pieces for the building. And I really just love how a work of art that an artist created on their cell phone using a glitch app could really transform the experience of this big public site in such a dramatic way. So we won't watch all of it. So in general, we also do a lot of student shows, and the reason I included this is one of our master thesis shows, because it kind of shows the gallery space in almost a neutral condition: white walls, gray floor. You can kind of see, you know, it looks like a typical gallery, but this gallery was really built to be a media arts gallery, and I wanted to take advantage of that. So for my very first exhibition at Emerson, I decided to create a glitch art exhibition. And oops. So I invited this artist who we just also saw, but this was a year prior, Allison Tannenhouse, to coordinate with a number of her colleagues and friends a kind of a glitch art showcase. And oops, there we go. So this is what the gallery looked like. We used 17 projectors to project on every single surface that we could to make as close to a fully immersive environment as we could. Here's a couple of different views. So each of these images that you see here is just one snapshot. They were constantly changing and had hundreds of images on each of these reels. So it's this like very dynamic environment. And although this is an artist talk by Allison, and I'll just kind of talk over it because I know you don't have the audio, but you can just kind of see what it was like to experience this exhibition. So here are the galleries from the outside. We put these rear projection screens in the window. This is the artist. I can share the link to her talk afterwards if you want to hear more about her work, but you can kind of see how dynamic the environment was inside the gallery space. And her work really very much speaks to the visual saturation of all of our environments, how we are just constantly inundated with images from all directions, and we often don't have control over, you know, how they come into us or how many we see at the same time. And her work really is like this kind of aesthetic counterpoint to the image saturation of our culture. Here's a collaboration with Ben Foley. We had a lot of events, which now, you know, looking back, just seems so radical to have so many people in a single space together. We had a lot of musicians and DJs and kind of synth masters who would come and respond to the work on the walls. Property Materials was one of the friends that she brought in, and it was just a really dynamic experience. So I'll just pause that right there. And then now for something very different. So the next exhibit that I curated for Emerson in October last year was called Future Ancestral Technologies, Nakshibi, by an indigenous artist called Chinupa Hanskalugar. And I had come across his work at the Peabody Essex Museum in an exhibit called American Nature. And his work in that particular show, once I encountered it, it was at the very end of the exhibition. It brought me to tears, and it was such a powerful project. And I don't know, I think as somebody who looks at art for a living, and I look at so much art all the time, and I think about it and read about it, and to be truly moved by someone's work, to me, was just a real signal to do something with it, or to respond to it, or to somehow see if I could take this work and his messaging and kind of bring it to my community. So we brought a number of his costumes, or regalia he calls them. He makes them out of refurbished materials. These are some clay pieces on top of a sports helmet with some leftover felt. He brought in a giant teepee that has solar panels on it and is situated in this digital 2-channel video environment. So this idea of future ancestral technologies is really thinking or rethinking of the future as having an indigenous presence in the future, because so often, unfortunately, when we think of indigenous peoples, we think of them in the past, or in somehow in something that used to be great, but maybe now is not. And that's something that his work actively counters and critiques, and he's saying, no, the future can be indigenous, and some of our technologies, like for example, mobile living or mobile technologies, could really be the solution for the future. So that was part of the impetus for the exhibit. You can see a few more of his regalia right here. They're all made out of recycled materials. A lot of his work is performative. where he does these land-based performances, and then he will wear these costumes or has others wearing these costumes, and they perform land-based actions, which he then documents. He did a performance for Emerson where he live drew the legend, the origin story of this exhibition on the wall. Here you can see a couple of the videos and how we had them displayed. And here's what it looked like on the outside. This is the last exhibit at Emerson in the traditional sense that I'll talk about. So this was a show called Spacetime. As part of my interview process at Emerson, I had to create an exhibition in 48 hours as part of a test. So I came up with this idea of Spacetime, and I was looking really at art that I thought at that particular moment was really dynamic and interesting to me, and what about it was the thing that interested me. And it really was, again, this idea of art as event and art as something that's a dynamic relational form, not just an object that you look at, but something that kind of moves through space and time in a way that's interesting. And I kind of translated the rather vague Spacetime exhibit title into also a subtitle of a 4-dimensional drawing show. So 4 dimensions, it's really X, Y, Z, and T, T standing for time. So really thinking of an object moving through space and time and the various coordinates. So here are the artists in the exhibit. The exhibit itself, we had digital projections, 3D printed objects, inkjet prints, VR drawings, site-specific light installation, and a dancing robot. And I'll show you some of those works. So this is the robot right here. We also had a dramatic video piece here by Monika Grishmala. Oops. So, and then I'm just gonna talk you through a little virtual walkthrough of the show, because it's just so much easier sometimes to see art when you can see it in the space rather than just a photograph of it. So here's the gallery, completely different, very transformed from the Glitchcraft show. This is the work by Zuzana Zaghetti, where we were projecting on this lump of clay, and she was basically line drawing with light onto the walls and onto the sculpture. And you could travel through kind of this 3D software. And here you can see the line kind of traveling on the gallery floor right before it hops onto the pedestal. And then the work that you kind of saw behind there is by Sarah Trahan. And she works a lot with technology and different printmaking technologies. She works in a 3D printing lab at Montserrat. And we decided to showcase a series of work. These are little animated GIF files of these prints that she makes from the leftovers when you're making a 3D printed object. I'll just pause it for 1 second. When you're making a 3D printed object, there's kind of a base plate. And when you take the object off, you're left with this plate. And what she was interested in is the leftover, the detritus, if you will. And it was so beautiful to her, and she decided to print it. And then, so each of these animated GIFs has 50 frames of 50 paper prints that she made of a little leftover bit from a 3D print. And she then animated it. So you can kind of really see this dialogue between the machine and between the artist's hand. Then here's the sculpture. This is the Dancing Robot by Nicole Lehulier, an artist from Chile who's at MIT right now getting her PhD in architecture. And so she made this sculpture that's vibrating, and it's kind of has a musical score that it dances to. And as the score is executed, the sculpture moves in response to the vibrations of the score. And this is a piece by Monika Grishmala, which was a performative video drawing where the artist installed a drawing made out of tape on a circular theater stage. And she first created the drawing and then turned on the stage. So as it rotated, it would snap and kind of slowly deconstruct. And she also had 2 VR drawings. And here you can kind of see a couple of details. I had never really shown virtual reality work in a gallery setting, so it was an interesting challenge to present the work and also to narrate it. And lastly, we had a sculptural installation by Catherine Mitchell DeRico that really worked with light, movement, dance, and you kind of see there's this choreography of objects in space, but also the reflections in light, almost in a way that a dance would be choreographed. That has a beautiful soundtrack as well, very subtle, of water going through a river. There's a video of the soundtrack. It was a piece very much about seeing and looking, and kind of this shifting of perspective. So then suddenly everything that we had planned came to a halt. So mid-March, we had our last event, the gallery closed, all our teaching moved online, and yeah, basically the entire art world came to a screeching halt. And it took a little while to be thinking about, how can we respond to this, or how can we continue to support the artists that we're working with, and also maybe, not instantly rush to producing new things, and maybe take a moment to absorb and maybe pause. And for people who know me know that's really hard for me to be pausing. So with my students, I was curating an exhibit based on the Curating Contemporary Art class for them, or they curated the show, and we had to produce it. And 2 weeks before they were going to make the physical exhibit, it was canceled. So just going to stop sharing this and show you this other. Just going to take 1 second, have it all lined up. So the students made a website and also created a virtual replica of our gallery space. So it's on a platform called Art Steps, and it's free. It's an open source platform, so anyone can create an exhibit there. But it was really quite amazing, and 2 of the students in the class really built out the space itself, and all the students had different roles in terms of putting together like exhibition text or designing certain components. But it was really quite an exciting platform, and we are still hoping to actually create the real exhibit. And we won't spend too much time in here. It's a little bit hard to navigate within Zoom, but I will share the link with Jeffrey. And but it was just really exciting to be able to still create a gallery experience, showcasing the work of my students while everything literally was closed. So it was interesting to have to pivot, and also to challenge ourselves in terms of, well, now that we have a virtual space, what can we leave behind, and what do we need to keep of our real space? And in this particular case, actually, because we had curated for the real space, we decided to leave a lot of the limitations of the real space in place, in the sense that we use similar dimensions and similar functionality and access points, etc. But going forward, I'm going to teach this class again in the fall, and if we have to do another virtual exhibit experience, I think that we should, curate for that environment specifically, and we could literally make our own mass mocha, for example. We don't need to have a room that's only the size of our normal exhibition space. So hopefully we can take it to the next level. One other thing that we decided to do was to activate our windows, because our gallery is still closed and has been closed. So we thought it would be really good to, kind of make lemonade out of lemons or something. So we put together an exhibit called Sending Light, to kind of as a thank you to the first responders to the COVID crisis. It was part of a larger international initiative. So these are all windows of our galleries, and we used rear projection screens as well as monitors, and kind of, use the surfaces that we had available to us, and try to maximize them for art purposes to kind of still be active and showcase work from our community. So, and then lastly, I'm just going to show a few things, a few projects that are in progress or in process. I think I like doing that, but I also think it's important, you know, curating is very similar to an artistic practice in that sometimes you have multiple things happening at the same time that are front burner, back burner, that are kind of coming to the surface at different moments and are in various states of completion. So I'm working on a couple of projects that deal with climate change. One is a large scale solo show with an artist called Georgie Friedman, Hurricane Lost. And I'm just going to check the time really quick to see if I have time to show you a little preview of the test that we're doing. So yeah, maybe I will, just because it's so cool. Show you quickly. All right, here we go. All right, so this is a little test. So the artist built a replica of the gallery space, and this is a test piece. So she's going to basically create a virtual hurricane in the gallery with sculptural elements that are moving around. You can see some people here to scale, and it'll feel like you're in the center of a hurricane. And to me, we don't normally do such detailed kind of reproductions or pre-productions of our exhibitions, but it's really exciting to see this and then kind of imagine ahead of what it would look like. So hold on, I just have to go back to my talk. There we go. So that's one big project. Here's her model. I'm also working with an artist, Allison Maria Rodriguez, a Cuban artist who's doing a lot of work with digital animations, and she makes these incredible moving digital collages that have to deal with hurricanes, but very much from a familial and personal impact perspective as somebody whose family's literally affected by the hurricanes. So it'll be an interesting counterpoint to George's piece, which is much more scientific. And then there's a third leg to the series, which is a climate listening project with Dayna Reggero, which is kind of like the StoryCorps project, but then really centered around stories around climate change. And then the other exhibit that I'm working on right now, this is still a working title. It's called Truth and Reconciliation, which is a project that I've been working on for the past 6 months, maybe, about grief and loss in light of current social injustice. So this project has suddenly become much more urgent and more relevant. So I'm trying to figure out how to forefront this project in terms of my schedule. Originally, I had thought of it kind of as a post-election project, because regardless of what the election outcome will be, there will really be an urgency around grief and reconciliation, and especially around racial injustice and inequity. So, this is actually an artist, Nugent Smith, who also, when I encountered his work at the Mills Gallery in Boston, really moved me very much. This is an artist, Lily Mini Colors, who would be doing some performances. Colleen Smith, whose work I encountered at Mass MoCA, where there was a small video piece on a monitor of a performance she did out in the street. It was a parade with these banners, and I strongly encourage you to check out her work. It's extremely powerful, very moving, and I really want to bring it to Boston. And lastly, an artist, Khalil Joseph, who made a piece called Black News, where he kind of made a video compilation of a critical point of view on television and Black bodies in the media, which I think is such an important topic these days. And then lastly, this artist, Alexandra Bell, who will be coming to our campus this fall, where she takes New York Times articles and front pages and edits them and proposes rearrangement of the facts and images to be presented in a more equitable manner. Very powerful work. It's hard to show it in this context because you can't really read what she's doing, but I strongly encourage you to check out her work, the Counter Narrative series. So this is my last slide. Right now, kind of in response to all of the galleries closing, about a month or so ago, another commercial gallerist, David Guerra from Area Code Gallery in Boston, and I served on a panel together. And afterwards, he mentioned to me, he's like, oh, I have this idea. I want to do this virtual art fair in Boston. I want to talk to you about it. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. So we talked, and yeah, it's really happening now. We have a group of, we decided to collaborate, and we have a group of about 8 curators and about 20 other people who are participating in this online virtual art fair, which is accompanied by offline satellite art installations that are safe, socially distanced art experiences. It's called Area Code Art Fair. I encourage you all to check it out. We have a call for art in a number of different media and disciplines, which is open until July 6th. And it's free to participate. It has an unconventional distribution model in terms of the profits. Every artist who participates gets a share of the profits of the overall fair. And we are really doing this with a group of people who are all individually and with our organization severely affected by the COVID crisis, but we just wanted to do something and support our community and the artists in our community and give back with what we could do while we were all simultaneously also dealing with the tremendous creative loss of all the canceled and postponed exhibitions, artist talks, artist opportunities, which will have a ripple effect through the arts community, not just for this year, but for several more years to come. So yeah, that's my talk. Here's how you can follow me on social media. There's my email address. If any of you have questions or would like to talk to me separately, I would love to meet you.
Whoa.
Is that too much?
No,
That's a
it's
lot.
so impressive. Like, what a wonderful presentation. It's like a retrospective of your greatest hits. And I feel like knowing you for so long, Leonie, it's really the tip of the iceberg of what you've accomplished in your career, in your storied career. And I'm excited to open up conversation with the group to have access to ask questions, talk to Leonie about anything that you might have seen that might have been inspirational to you. And maybe I'll kick it off with a question. Just Leonie, when do you sleep?
Well, I don't watch a lot of television and I am very driven in terms of, I mean, art is my passion, it is my work, but it's also my love. So yes, so a lot of what I do is my job, but it also is my passion. So it really just feels like I enjoy spending all the time that I do on these things. And I think my current project, the Area Code Art Fair, is a perfect example of that. I don't have to do this. This is not something that's, required of me in my job, but it just feels like it's the right thing to do. And there's an urgency in this current moment. And yeah, I want to be a part of the solution, or at least try and be a part of, maintaining our community, because there's just so much loss and grief. And yeah, how can we make something positive and, I don't know, contribute to something that's forward looking and also, I don't know, nurturing in a way that, we're all kind of seemingly in need of.
Well, I have many other questions, but I can call Leonie anytime, but I want this to be open to you guys to have access to her mind and her work. And so feel free to chime in, unmute yourself, share your thoughts, and then we'll go for a little bit here and see what we can come up with.
That's fantastic. I mean, I do absolutely think of you with a great deal of respect. I don't think I really knew you well, but I'm part-time faculty at Montserrat, and that was just, to me, so extraordinary in terms of your own creativity, and also, a passion you have that attracts. One of the big issues, I think, for galleries mostly is the commercial aspect. It's like, well, if we're not selling and people are not buying and people can't come into the gallery, how do we survive? And I'm sure you survive mostly by grants and, pitching ideas that not only are innovative and creative, but are really poignant. And I think I'm frankly beyond impressed that I think what you're doing at Emerson is amazing. It's great you have the opportunity to have these storefront displays, because that is a direct connection to, even a passerby is going to stop, or they should, to see what's happening here. And I think it's so important to have people like yourself who aren't, your goal is not profit. Your goal is not, as much as you want to support artists, there's only so much you can do in that way. But I think the thing that you're preserving is the intellect of artists, the idea that artists, the creativity of artists does not have a limit. And I really enjoyed seeing your presentation in terms of these are beyond the limits. They're really very, very extraordinary, and to some extent outrageous. The biotech one of, well, we couldn't get the samples into the country. Well, duh. Yeah, that was somewhat predictable. But again, I love the fact that you're challenging so many boundaries, and it's an action and reaction. One of the hardest things to accept from an artist's point of view is indifference. If people who go to galleries and look and go, shrug their shoulders, is for an artist the worst thing that can happen. And I think the artists you are talking about and showing are provocateurs in a way. Definitely Guerrilla Girls is that, but also for getting people's attention. There's and there is a social absolute connection to this that doesn't come out in speeches and rhetoric and politics and so on. That is a realm that I think is more important than ever. Anyway, I think it's terrific work. I think and hope that you're appreciated at Emerson, and this keeps going. It's really terrific stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Dean. That's so nice of you, and that means a lot to me. And yeah, you do the work because you feel there's a lot of, it's like, it just feels like you should do it, or it feels like the right thing to do. But then it's really nice to kind of see it come across, or just have people respond to things that moved me, and have it and see it move our students or our audience. And that is so important to me. And then also the idea of accessibility and trying to lower the threshold in terms of people experiencing art, because I feel like contemporary art can be so intimidating, which is sometimes hard to imagine for us as makers or people who deal with it every day. But you know, to be able to have the confidence to go into an institution like the MFA, to walk up the steps, to feel like it's a place that you're invited or that is also there for you. It's a huge threshold that I know the MFA is, you know, actively working to address, but I think contemporary art in general, you know, anything that we can do, or me as a curator that I can do to kind of lower that threshold, to make it easier to encounter the artwork. You don't need to even decide to go inside or open a door or go into a space you've never been before, but to just be able to see it on your way as you're walking the dog, or, you know, that's really exciting to me. And I didn't really mention in my last bit about the Area Code Art Fair. So besides being part of organizing the overall kind of events, I'm in charge of curating and jurying the video and digital art selections. And what we're doing for that is we are hosting and organizing a drive-in movie theater experience. So we have a partnership now with actually Creative Collective in Salem, and we are going to be having a drive-in experience where instead of seeing a movie on the screen, you'll be seeing the work by contemporary video and digital artists. And again, it's that, you know, lowering the threshold. It's like we're all familiar with going to a drive-in movie theater and you just come in with your car and then you can get popcorn and also at the same time see some cutting edge contemporary art on a screen in front of you. So
Terrific, terrific.
That's a fantastic idea.
it's so fun. I can't wait. It'll be August 14th at Salem State, actually. Yeah.
August 14th. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And-
So it'll be really exciting, and it's going to be safe, you know, because that was part of the challenge. We're like, we don't just want to create an online experience, which we're also doing, but how can we create safe offline or in-person experiences with art without people having to go inside buildings or touch anything? So one of our other project series is called the Storefront Window Series. So we already have 20 storefront sites throughout downtown Boston where artists will be making work in the storefront windows. So you can just go on a walking tour and engage with the art just on the street.
Wow. My son just he went to Emerson, and he graduated right before, I guess he graduated in 2018, and that gallery wasn't there when he went there, right? That's a pretty new gallery.
It's new, but it was there. Yeah, it's been around. This is our 4th year. So it started in 20, whatever that is, 16. Yeah.
Oh, gee. Well, he was there, but he was in journalism, but he also worked at the radio, you know, at the
Radio station.
WERS. He was one of the DJs there.
Well, definitely one of my jobs is to kind of make the gallery more visible, not just on campus, but in the greater Boston area, but also for our students, because a lot of our students didn't necessarily know it was there or didn't necessarily feel like it was there for them. So that's an important part of my mission.
He hasn't heard of it. I mean, he's still around. I mean, he's working as a journalist, but I'm going to tell him to go check it out once this is over.
Yep. And until then, we are working on all sorts of creative ways to still bring visual art to campus, even if we can't have a space right now.
Okay, thank you.
So, and it might mean bringing art to the dorms and bringing art to the outside of buildings and, you know, doing more public art and more art online.
Yeah, I love the piece, you know, that was the projection for your graduates this year. That was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah, I have a question about that. How long did that, was that a one-night projection or was it multi-days?
It was up for 10 days actually, because it's we have a permit with the city of Boston for 4 10-day increments in the year. It's very strict. There's a lot of restrictions in terms of what you can project on a building, the speed of things, the content of things. So yeah, it was up for 10 evenings, 9 p.m. on. And then we didn't have a lot of time to put this all together. We probably had about 3 weeks, and we had a couple of teams, production teams, artistic direction teams, and like logistical teams, and also a documentation team who all worked on this together pretty much nonstop for 3 weeks straight to pull this together for our graduates.
You must be a heck of a project manager.
Yes, I was actually brought in to help like make sure things were going to happen. And that is one of my skills is project management and motivation and kind of being able to see where we need to go and then what needs to happen to try and get us there. And, you know, it really was very much a team effort. I think there was probably about 20 people who worked on this. The various aspects and different people were in charge of different things. So yeah.
I'm amazed by the area code art fair, like that you've got this going. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but for the first couple months of COVID, I've just been like, can't do anything but watch the news, read the news. And you guys have this art fair already like up and running and ready to go.
Well, Karen, I have to say, I felt the same way. I was kind of paralyzed, frankly, and it was just, there was just so much like coming in. And also, like I mentioned, this idea of grief and loss. And I really was overwhelmed by all the things we were losing. Not, I mean, obviously all of the deaths and so overwhelming, like the numbers and all of that, but also, yeah, everything in terms of my personal life and, you know, everything just shrank down to a really small space with my very few loved ones. And you know, everything was kind of gone and it was really hard to process that. So, but yeah, about a month ago when David reached out to me, it was kind of at that, it was a tipping point for me because we were both just like, we need to do something, you know, and like, what can we do? And his gallery, his commercial gallery was in the South End in Boston. And besides being shut down due to COVID, they also had an extreme flooding event there. I don't know if any of you know about that, but so maybe, I don't know, 10, 12 galleries were flooded, his gallery included. So not only was he closed, he now lost his inventory, his space was shut down. It's like all, you know, with flooding, water damage, they had to rip out everything because of mold. So it was just such a tragic moment and kind of in the midst of all of this loss, we were like, well, what can we do? You know, and I'm like, well, we have our energy, we have our spirits, we have our networks, like, let's get people together and get up and like, what can we do that we can contribute to our community and try to be a light or an opportunity or a kind of a moment of something to look forward to. Even if you aren't participating, you can maybe enjoy it as a visitor and a spectator. Because for all, I mean, for most of us, like I love going to art experiences and events and exhibits. That's what I do. And to not be able to go see art or to meet artists or to go to a studio or to look at a painting is just devastating to me. It's like, that's my life. So partially selfishly motivated, we're like, we want to look at art, you know, we want to hang out with our people.
Oh, I'm really inspired. I'm so inspired. I mean, I live 3 hours away from you, so that is unfortunate for me, but maybe it'll be worth the trip.
You live in New England?
I live in the Berkshires.
Okay. So, because it really is meant to be a New England art fair. And although most of the curators are kind of in and around Boston for now, our goal is for this to be not just, I mean, this year is our pilot. We already have accepted the fact that we're going to do this more than once because it's just way too fun. So, but it's really meant to be a New England thing. So we're looking for ways to expand beyond the kind of greater Boston area. We're partnering with organizations in Maine and Vermont and Connecticut and Rhode Island to have satellite locations and get satellite galleries and organizations to be putting on events as part of this as well.
Ooh. So
think about that.
Franchise the area code art fair. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a distributed model.
I volunteered North Adams for.
Okay, that would be great. So Jeffrey has my email. We can talk after.
Right.
But yeah, we're really hoping to have participation for people across the New England region. And this is year one. It's an experiment. We're all just kind of doing it for the love of it, but we've never organized a virtual online art fair.
But it seems like a lot of your career, like one of your themes seems to be having some new technology through a lot of what you've done. And to have these, like you've done a lot of site specific stuff, but there's so much that you've done that's like projection and digital and video. And that seems like it's a very nice way to move into this virtual art fair. That just
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
It's a great observation. And
You're the perfect person to do this.
yes, so that's probably why I was invited. They're like, we need you to come on board. But yeah, it's great. And I think it has legs. And I'm feeling just from the response we've gotten from artists that we've talked to and other curators and artist organizations, you know, there seems to be a real need for something positive right now. And this art fair is providing that. So.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to interject that it's interesting how crisis is something that does come up from time to time. When I first moved to Boston, when I first started teaching at Mass Art in 1970, Kent State happened. And in terms of how it affected artists, I became an activist, you know, doing performance art actually at the time, working with a group called Theater X in Milwaukee, which is where I came from and came into Boston. But in Boston, it was really a time of amazing creativity in spite of, you know, there was partly that, but, you know, there was, MIT was offering bus, you could go anywhere you wanted and hitchhike there and get the MIT bus to go anywhere, not just to MIT, anywhere you wanted to go. And there were artist groups that formed that were really the vitality of those groups and the energy within the groups are so connected to this. And it was interesting that with all the negativity that was happening, there was a really positive energy coming out of it, which I think is very needed. You probably know of the show at the MFA, Earth, Air, Fire, and Water Show. Or you may not, but if you don't, I highly encourage you look into it, because the curator of that show, Virginia Gunter, was a faculty at Mass Art at the time. And it's probably up until the show you did with the Guerrilla Girls and other things, the most innovative show ever put on at the MFA. And it included artists like Dennis Oppenheim and you know, Adopine and artists who were totally experimental. They were doing exactly the kinds of things. There was an exhibit of snakes that, or they were, what's the sea animal that's very much like a snake, that was, they were going through galleries in tubes filled with water and the proper things to support the snakes. There were exhibits of fire, actual fire, where the fire department had to have an engine stationed outside of the MFA 24/7, and had to have a fire marshal in the gallery with a piece that was a gigantic torch, you know, that has was very, very dramatic. There were, anyway, the
Yeah,
entire
that sounds like
space,
my kind of show.
yeah, check it out. It was
Yeah,
called
I
the
will
Earth, Air,
definitely
Fire,
check
and
it
Water
out.
Show.
Yeah.
It happened in 1970. I was in the show, actually, too, but it was really extraordinary and experimental. And the other thing about it was that some of the exhibits in the show were absolute failures. That, you know, because the artists were experimenting with different things. And so you may know the artist Robert Morris, you know, and he was trying to do a piece on the front lawn of the museum that involved putting 60 tons of cement on the lawn and then dragging a 10-ton steel plate through that using a crane and creating a path through the cement. And I still have photographs of the fact that the plate couldn't do that. And the cables from the crane broke. And Virginia is there, if you can relate to this, signing invoices for the thousands of dollars that were, because this, the piece itself as the artist envisioned it wouldn't work. Eventually, the whole thing was, they had to bring in, let it set, and then use air hammers to take it all away. And again, I think it's not so much about the failure of that particular piece, but again, of, this art doesn't always work out.
Right. And what you said earlier, it's about pushing boundaries. And I think that's what's so exciting to me about exhibit making and working with contemporary artists and creating opportunities for artists to do their work and finding new ways to showcase the work. It's just really exciting. And that sounds like a great exhibit. I teach, curating contemporary arts, and we look at different exhibits over the years and how they contributed to the practice. So I think it sounds like a really great example that I could use in my class, actually.
Take a look at that history.
Yeah. Great. So I don't know, I think we're almost at our time. I don't know if anyone else would like to ask any questions, or otherwise, Jeffrey has my email, and I'm totally happy to follow up with any one of you, and also, let me know what you're up to in terms of your work or your practice, wherever you are.
Yeah, I'll be happy to share the video that we recorded tonight of Leonie's awesome presentation and share her contact information as well. So you can keep in touch, and hopefully she'll be curating some of your work in some of her future shows at Emerson or elsewhere. She seems to be on the move, but if one, as always, right? Any last minute questions before we say goodbye to Leonie for the night? I'll take that. Nope, Jane.
All right.
I did see the
There you go.
Guerrilla Girls when you did that.
Oh, in Montserrat?
Yeah, it was a while ago now. It's like, I don't know.
2012.
2012. Yeah. So it was about 8 years ago, yeah. And I really remembered that show. It was awesome. So
Yeah. And it was exciting because as part of the exhibit, we did a conference. So we had the Guerrilla Girls headlining the conference, and about 450 people came. The conference theme was art and activism, which is such a relevant topic still today, 8 years later. So.
Oh.
Well, Leonie, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. What a great opportunity to see all the work that you've created. Bravo to you, but also really plant some seeds, I think, in terms of many ways that art can be created, and not just in a traditional sense, but utilizing technology and understanding a lot of the social and contemporary issues that are relevant today and have been for years, but certainly today. And great to see that you were forced to pause during COVID.
Yes, for a brief moment I paused.
You blinked, but you were still going full force.
Yes. All right, well, good night, everyone. Nice to see you,
Bye.
and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.